Okay, this is the beginning of this painting getting laid out. This is a 140-pound half sheet of cold press watercolor paper. And this is the tissue paper, tracing paper, that I've traced my sketch from. And underneath is what is called Seurat, transfer paper. This comes in white and graphite. I'm using the graphite, obviously, because you would not want to use white on a white sheet of paper, unless you wanted to use it as a resist. I have it laid out where I want it. I already have a frame in mind for this if it turns out to be anything. So I have her aligned where I would want her to be in the frame. I'm trying to pick up this piece of paper. You think I can do that? No. There is the Seurat. It can be quite dirty. It is graphite. So you can see there where I touched it and I was rubbing and it transferred to the paper from me dragging something across the paper. Tracing paper goes over top. Then you firmly, but not super hard, firmly trace out with a pencil the outline and all the details that you would like to have for in your memory on this piece of paper to start painting. We'll take a quick peek underneath here to make sure I got as much as I want. And I think that's all I want to work with. Got a little freedom for decisions of some abstraction. I had an extra scrap piece here and I put some water on it. A quick pattern, just a quick outline of just a partial part of her, a partial piece of her skirt and some of her body, just to get an idea where I'd like to place the colors. We'll see what happens there. Here are the colors I've chosen. We'll do a swatch: Payne's Gray, Cobalt Turquoise, Soul Shine, Vermilion Hue, and Opus, which is a vivid pink. We'll see what these do. Here they are laying out. And they're going to go on this swatch right here. And this is our Payne's Gray. And I never use a good paintbrush for this. Always use an old scrubber. That way you don't wear out your points. All right, we're going to add a little bit of this Cobalt Turquoise into the Payne's Gray and see what we get. These are Vinci paints, and I've never worked with them before on a major piece of artwork. So I'd like to see how these two granulate together. That's quite lovely. I like that a lot. Let's turn up our lighting a little bit here for you. That should give you a better idea of what we're working with. It's still a little dark. Okay, we're going to try the Soul Shine right here. It's a beautiful, beautiful Indian yellow. I work with mostly semi-transparent and transparent watercolors. I'm not really fond of opaque. It tends to be chalky, and I'm not fond of that. It's just a personal thing. We're going to try the Vermilion Hue and see what oranges we can get with this. Ooh, that is so intense. It's going to override, so we're going to wet that down a little bit. See how they layer, go across each other. That's lovely. And we'll throw a little bit of opera up against it, up against all of it. And I think I'm going to like this a lot. I think I'm going to like the vermilion and the opera together. And the soul shine is going to go really nicely with that. Get a lot of beautiful tones of orange and yellow and some hot pink in there. I think that will go really nicely together. Hopefully that's coming through. I might have to turn my lighting up. You may not be able to see the blending. I may have to warm up the lights a little bit or cool them down. There, that is much more accurate. You're seeing what I'm seeing, almost. And look at the nice sheen. This sheen going across here is lovely. I may drop some salt in there. I threw a few grains of salt in. Might still be too wet. Salt's tricky. You have to be careful how soon you put it on. The paper is probably still a little too wet. Yes, it is. It's too much sheen. Maybe only 1 or 2 of those grains will do anything. I think even this was too dry and 1 was too wet. I'll keep grabbing a couple pieces and throwing them on there as I work along. Now we're going to see what kind of greens we'll get. We'll start with the Soul Shine. A little bit of the cobalt. That's a nice green. That's really pretty. Throw a little bit of indigo in there and see how that's going to darken up. Ooh, that's a nice bleed. Put all 3 in there and see what kind of brown you would get, or deep green, excuse me. To throw a little bit of opera in there. Gotta have a little bit of red to get some bronzing going here. And I think I like my color choices. Check our sheen. Still quite wet. Next, we're going to do the vermilion. A little bit of cobalt turquoise. Sorry. Let's see what we get here. This is the vermilion and the cobalt turquoise. Throw a little bit of indigo in there and see what those 3 do together. And I like that a lot. Check our sheen. This right here, and this is the salt I'm using, coarse kosher salt. Grab a couple pieces, we'll just throw it on the table. It's quite coarse. See if we can get anything going here. Might still be too wet. It's absorbing it. Interesting. Grab a few more pieces. Right here might be a good place. The sheen is almost gone. There, we've got a few pieces. See if we can get anything out of that. See what happens. Yep, you can see we're It was way too wet, and it's pulling up the water, but it's so wet that it won't do anything. And I could probably just pull that salt off. Yep, when you pull it off, when it's too wet, it just does nothing. It just sits there. All right, we'll continue with just the opera, since we've done the vermilion and the soulshine. Add a little bit of turquoise, cobalt turquoise, of which I got too much paint. Ooh, that's pretty. Some nice violet action going there. So that's cobalt turquoise and opera pink. Quite beautiful. Just a little touch of indigo. See what happens. Sorry, Payne's Gray. Pull a little bit of Payne's Gray through the opera and the turquoise. And we can pull a little bit of soul shine through there and see what happens. And that's a very pretty orange. So far, I am liking these four colors together. I'll do a swatch of yellow, turquoise, a little bit of Payne's Gray, a little bit of vermilion, a little bit of opera, and they're quite concentrated. Get very, very close. Pick up some nice bleeding. Focus a little better here for you. They are lovely colors. And I think that's what I'll use in my painting. See what happens. And you can see that the opera and the vermilion and soulshine still were too wet. So the salt was useless. However, the Payne's Gray and the cobalt turquoise were quite lovely. And I knew they would be. They're heavily granulated. I knew they would do that. But it's nice to show you. And I've never used salt with, oh, here we are getting some. I'm getting a few results here. It's pulling it in, absorbing, and picking up the color and removing it from the paper. It is actually working a little tiny bit in a few places. And here it worked. That is really pretty. I think we're going to use some salt in her skirt. That'll give the fabric look. Better timing. It's pulling, because it was so wet, it's pulling a lot of color, but almost ballooning. But that looks really lovely. Check the sheen on this. Still quite wet. These are very dry. No salt dries here. This one's too wet and the other two spots dried too quickly. Oh, that's got a little bit of moisture in it. Give it a few tries there. I think I'll try one grain. You can actually use a pair of tweezers and place your salt where you want it to go. There, I put one deliberately right in that little bend. I'm going to come back in about 15-20 minutes when everything's very dry. And then you can flick the salt off and throw it away. And we'll just drop some color in. That's the vermilion and the cobalt turquoise. Add a little bit of soul shine in there for the skirt. I'm going to continue to bring that vermilion into it. Because she is a flamenco dancer, we'll put some frills in there. See if we can get them to hold. It's pretty wet. For a little bit of shadow, I'll just drop some of this in there. This is actually the Payne's Gray and Cobalt Turquoise mixed together. And not a lot, because I just want to see what they'll do together. I sound like Bob Ross, don't I? Mixing my watercolors. Pound your brush. Now we're going to charge it with some opera. See what happens. It's very, very wet. I want to see what happens while it's very, very wet. Now I'm going to leave it completely alone. I may try another ruffle. I can do that. think we're gonna go in there with just some cobalt turquoise and create another ruffle. Pull the colors together and bring some of that opera out in there. And you can see the beautiful granulation that is happening because there's so much water and the colors are blending together. You're getting a lot of balloon bleeds, but as the heavier colors that granulate, that's why they granulate, because the pigment is so heavy, it actually goes to the very deep pockets of the paper and will puddle in there like little pebbles. And this will continue to bleed if you wanted to. At this point, I don't know what the sheen looks like. I'm going to move you and see if we can pick up the sheen. Yeah, there's a lot of sheen. Lots and lots of water. It's quite lovely. That's a nice hot color. All right. Now, if you want to, you can experiment with drops of clean water, of which I do not have. Just drop a couple drops in there, see what happens. It's still quite wet, but it can bloom nicely. And you can use that for texture. If you want to, you can pick your paper up. This is laying flat, and you can let it run. If you would like vertical lines, I am not going to do anything else to this. And now it's going to have to dry. I do not know what the drops of water will do. Check the sheen, see if we can show you the sheen. There we go, heavy water. And what we'll do is we will put it vertical. And look at that run. What a mess. But look at that, it is pretty. It's running down into the ruffles. That could be very lovely.